TikTok story, let's bring in our first guest. He's president of the Young Republicans Club, Gavin Wax. Welcome, Gavin.
Thank you for having me, Jessica.
Okay, so I will confess I love TikTok, but I can live without it. Do you think President Trump has made the right decision?
Well, Jessica, I'm a big fan of the app as well, but I'm also a fan of President Trump's recent decision to ban the app if they don't liquidate their U.S. assets within 45 days. It's a great app. It's very innovative, and it's obviously grown tremendously over the last few months with everyone in quarantine. But the fact remains that they are stealing our data. They are spying on U.S. citizens. And this is not just going to a domestic big tech monopoly, which we have enough problems with already. It's going to the Communist Party of China, which is a geopolitical rival of the U.S., if there ever was one. So while I can recognize the app is great and even has a very large conservative base on it that you don't see in other apps, they don't censor political speech nearly as much as maybe a Twitter or Facebook, there still are many issues with the app, and this executive order addresses that.
And Gavin, who do you think is affected by the president's decision the most, and will this have any effect on his re-election in any way?
I think the people would be most impacted are the Chinese party officials who are certainly using this app to collect data on U.S. citizens. But I'm sure some advertisers and some influencers who have moved on to the app, they'll be hurt by it in the short term. But we have a free market in this country, and this was an app that was based off of Vine, which was acquired by Twitter a few years ago, and that was originally an American company. So there's no reason to believe that a new domestic alternative can't be created. I know Instagram is looking into this, Snapchat, et cetera. So there may be an alternative to TikTok on the domestic U.S. market. And as far as his election chances, I don't think this is really going to play a big role in anyone who was planning to vote for Trump or not vote for Trump.
And do you think TikTok will end up selling in the 45 days, or do you think they're going to stand their ground and just kind of see what President Trump decides to do? Because as we know as Americans, he's going to go through with the order. We know when he pretty much says it, he's going to do it. But do you think the Chinese will hold out?
I think now that the order is pen to paper, I think they're going to realize this is no longer a bluff and they're going to have to liquidate. And it would be a much better alternative for them financially to simply liquidate their assets rather than have everything ended entirely and they get no return on their investment. To who they sell to is another question. I mean, I know they were talking about Microsoft earlier. I mean, personally, I don't think Microsoft would be much better than the Chinese government. But I guess, on the margins, it may be an improvement. But we'll see. I think most likely what happens is they try to sell, the sale doesn't go through in time, and then an alternative on the domestic market is created, and over time it replaces the TikTok market that has developed over the past year.
And you kind of touched on my next question, Gavin, but if it does sell, how will we know if China isn't continuing to steal data? Because when I heard, like you stated, if Microsoft buys it, okay, so it's a U.S. company, but how do we know that's a better company to be dealing with this data?
Right. I mean, we have massive issues with our privacy online in the U.S. We have a lot to deal with Facebook, with Twitter. So this is a big issue that needs to be addressed more broadly, not on a case-by-case basis or piecemeal. Hopefully we can see some reforms and some new laws on the books to deal with privacy, to deal with our data, and to deal with tech censorship and 230 protections that are being abused by the big tech monopolies. So this is part of that fight, but it's certainly not the end of the war. It's just one battle, and I would hope that President Trump will continue to push back against big tech for the rest of his administration.
And Gavin, is this the first time this has happened? Because I kind of believe it can't be with these apps, or is this just the first time it's made headlines like it has?
I think this is certainly one of the biggest cases of such a thing happening with an executive order and the president coming down. It's also one of the first major apps that I can remember that was essentially owned by the CCP. Obviously, WeChat is big, and that was also impacted by this order. But WeChat is largely not mainstream in the U.S. outside of Chinese diaspora communities here. But for a mainstream app, this is certainly historic. It's certainly groundbreaking, and it's the right decision. So I'm glad that he followed through on it, and I'm glad to see that there's a hard deadline with 45 days, and I'm looking forward to seeing how that develops.
And with it making headlines now, right before re-election or a presidential election, do you think that the left or the Democrats are hoping that this makes President Trump look bad on using an executive order, just because maybe in their idea, maybe they'll think that people who do support TikTok or want TikTok on their phone, maybe they'd see it as him kind of overstepping some sort of boundary. What are your thoughts on that?
Trump's base understands where his key policy issues lie, and that is in combating the Chinese threat to our economy, to our national security. And this is part of that fight. So his base, his loyal Trump voters, are not going to be swayed by this decision. If anything, it's going to reinvigorate them and show that he keeps his election promises, his mandate, this is very much part of. And as far as, people on TikTok that didn't like him to begin with, this doesn't change anything for them. They didn't like him before. They won't like him after. As I mentioned earlier, there was uniquely a large conservative, particularly Gen Z demographic on TikTok. There was a lot of pro-MAGA, pro-Trump content, unique for that platform compared to other platforms. That may be a slight bit of a blow to maybe some support he may have, but many of them are below the voting age, and hopefully they can understand in the grand scheme of things, a loss of an entertaining app is just the price to pay for data and privacy matters.
And Gavin, I don't know exactly how this information came to light in regards to how our government found out that China was actually stealing data. But do you really believe that China thought they would get away with this? Or what do you think their ultimate goal and plan was?
China doesn't play by the rules, and they will push every boundary they can until called out. I doubt they thought they would get away with it. Maybe they would have got away with it under a previous administration, but certainly not under the Trump administration. But they were going to run with it for as long as they can. They've been doing this sort of thing for years with intellectual property theft, with their currency manipulation, with their bad trade practices. So they have no problems being ethically compromised to get what they want. This is very much in line with their MO, and they're going to continue to do so until they meet force, and that's what President Trump did. He pushed back, and they were forced now. Well, they will be forced to show their hand. Either they fold and they sell, or they simply get banned completely from the U.S. market. But it's a good step. It sets good precedent, and hopefully more measures like this are enacted in the future.
All right. Well, thank you, Gavin, for your time today. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Jessica.
All right. And remember, you can watch America's Voice News on Dish Channel 219.